Welcome back to IR in Focus, the show where we dive into the latest trends and strategies shaping investor relations and corporate issuers. I'm your host, Carmen Lilly, and in the next 20 minutes, we'll be diving into IR workflows and the intersection of strategy and investor messaging. With me on this discussion is Kiley Rawlins from Ulta Beauty. Welcome, Kiley.
Thank you, Carmen. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
I am so glad that you're on this podcast with me today. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to my audience. Now, Kiley joined Ulta Beauty in 2019 as Vice President of Investor Relations and was named Senior Vice President, Investor Relations in January of 2025. Prior to joining Ulta Beauty, Kiley served as Vice President, Investor Relations for the Michaels Companies from 2016 to 2019 and Vice President of Investor Relations for Family Dollar stores from 2005 to 2015. Kiley received a bachelor degree of science degree in commerce from the University of Virginia, Go Hoos, and is a chartered financial analyst. Thank you so much for being here.
And thank you for having me.
So I wanted to open the conversation with just some light context to introduce you and Ulta Beauty's standing in the market. To kick us off, for those who may not follow Ulta Beauty closely or maybe not familiar with the beauty markets, how would you describe the company's role in the beauty industry today?
Yes, so Ulta Beauty is the largest specialty beauty retailer in the US with nearly 1,450 stores and a vibrant digital business. What is really unique about our model and to the credit of our founders, when we opened the first Ulta Beauty store nearly 35 years ago, we brought together brands normally found at drugstores and brands only found at department stores to create a really unique and elevated shopping experience for beauty. And in addition to the brands and the products, we added services. So we have a full service hair salon in almost every store. We offer brow services, makeup services, skin services, and select stores. And so we really have created a holistic beauty experience with an assortment that includes entry-level brands like CoverGirl and Maybelline and e.l.f., all the way to luxury brands like Chanel and Dior and Gucci and everything in between. And we've created something unique that our guests and members really love and engage with. But I think most importantly is we have a team of more than 50,000 store and field associates who are passionate about beauty and really love helping our guests find their products to help them and really be their best self.
I like that. I didn't know that you guys do have like salon services within Ulta. I'll have to check that out. And I do like your point on it being kind of like a holistic centered around beauty, whether it be hair, face, body. I like that messaging.
Yeah, the salons and the services that we offer enable us to provide our guests with expertise, right? So if you, even if you don't have a salon appointment, if you have questions about frizziness or color treated hair or dry hair or curly hair, our salon stylists can help you find the best products for you because they're experts in it.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that one-stop shop with the experts. It's great. And so you've been part of Ulta's investor relationships leadership team for a little bit now. And in some of your background, you really focused in on consumer retail. So what initially drew you to this role at Ulta Beauty and what's kept you excited about it?
Yeah, so I've been engaged in investor relations for a long time, more than 25 years, I think, if I do the math. And to your point, I've always been in retail. Retail is fun, it's dynamic, it's always changing because the consumer is always changing. And I think what drew me to the Ulta Beauty role specifically was just the market cap size of the company. It changes every day, but call it 15 to 20 billion. The opportunity to work with a large group of sell side analysts. We have 30 firms that publish research on us, and a focus on investor relations. In my prior roles, both with Family Dollar and Michaels, I focused on investor relations, but also had employee communications and PR. And so it was more of a communications focus. And so the role at Ulta Beauty gave me an opportunity to really focus on investor relations. I think beauty is such a fun category. It's innovative, it's growing. There's an emotional connection with the consumer. And so it's a great category to be in. But I think also what drew me to the role is the culture and the leadership team. We have an amazing team, all the way from, our frontline associates who represent the brand every day and help our guests, to our leadership team who are driving the strategy. I think that there is a real commitment to transparency and collaboration and optimism, and, a focus on the guest that is pervasive throughout the organization. And that's, really fun, to work with as a consumer retail company.
Yeah, holy mackerel. I didn't know you had 30 covering analysts. That really adds quite a dynamic a dynamic there. And I like your comments around how dynamic the retail space is, and especially when you think about with beauty, right? You have your very standard idea of beauty, but to your point, it is evolving, and you have all these like seasonal pushes as well, as I imagine, like as you adjust and grow with the times, where you adjust and grow with each season as well.
Yeah, I think, beauty is, as I said earlier, dynamic and innovative and personal, right? I think, what I used and needed and was interested when I was in my 20s and just starting my career is very different than what I need, what I'm interested in, today in my 50s. And so I think beauty, changes with you as you move through your, various life cycles. To your point, there's also seasonal change, right? In spring, we like color. We like, things tend to get a little lighter. In the winter, there's more, a jewel palette. I think particularly, in Chicago where I live, the weather is harsh. So my skincare regimen changes, my hair care regimen changes. And so being able to support guests through all of those changes, whether they're environmental or part of the life cycle, is really fun. But I think what's also really unique about this category is the entrepreneurship and innovation. I mean, we carry in our store today about 600 brands, almost 30,000 products. But every year we're looking at, 2 to 3,000 new brands that are coming to market. And unfortunately, we can't carry all of those brands. But I do think it reflects the innovation and entrepreneurship in this category, which is pretty unique.
Yeah, that is crazy unique. I didn't realize how many new makeup and beauty brands really, start up within any given year. That's really cool. It sounds like Ulta has a really distinctive spot in the retail and beauty space. So, tying this back, when you're talking to investors, what do you see as Ulta's biggest competitive edge?
Yeah, I think, I generally start with our assortment. We have, an unmatched assortment. We carry products across makeup and skincare and fragrance and hair care at all types of price points, right? Entry level price points to luxury and everything in between. And so that enables us to meet our guests where they are, from an age, from a demographic, from a financial standpoint, to help them find really the best solutions for them. Our associates aren't tied to a specific brand. We train them and educate them on all of our brands so they can help our guests find what they need. So the breadth of assortment is unique within the category. And then I think because we bring together both a significant footprint, more than 1,400 stores across the US, plus a digital platform end-to-end app that includes virtual try-on and skin analysis tools. We're really focused on bringing the two together to create an omni-channel experience for our guests that is curated and personalized. We combine the products and the experience with our loyalty program, which is loved by our members because it's so easy to accumulate points and spend points. But I think beyond the operational fundamental, I'd say, no one does what we do. We bring together beauty expertise and guidance and support with that human connection. And we really strive to create a welcoming, inclusive experience for our guests in our stores and across our digital platforms. We often say you don't have to put on makeup to come shop for makeup at Ulta Beauty. And so that's a unique positioning for us. I think from an investor standpoint, we have a really strong financial foundation. We lease all of our stores, but other than those obligations, we don't have any leverage on our balance sheet, and we have a strong, stable cash flow. And so that really gives us a lot of flexibility to invest in the business and to expand our reach.
Thank you. I really like how you kind of married those two pieces together in terms of thinking about, how Ulta Beauty and some of the programs that you're doing makes it stand out, but then tying that back to, well, how do I communicate that to investors and thinking about, the fundamentals. I like how you paired those two together. You knocked out like two of my questions in one. So thinking and maybe going and honing in a little bit more around investor discussion. So things like sustainability, governance, diversity, inclusion, which you mentioned are huge conversation points for investors today. And those conversations have spilled into policy and regulatory discussions as well. And then also on the other side of this, you pair this with inconsistent messaging from the administration on policies that directly impact corporations. I'm mainly thinking things like tariffs, right? So we were coming off of a week where we saw wild swings based off the news that you heard from tariffs are on, tariffs are off, tariffs are on, but they're lowered, right? So the markets reacted appropriately. And it's quite messy in the markets right now. So how is Ulta, given all of these different things that are going on with the market, how is Ulta thinking about those priorities and how do they come up in your investor discussions?
It's a great question, and you're right. The operating environment is really dynamic right now. I think maybe we'll split the conversation into 2 points. I think one, on the, ESG and diversity and inclusion part of the question, I think we have to always come back to the business and the strategy and what makes sense for our business and our objectives and goals. Beauty is such a personal category. What works for me and what I like is going to be very different than what you're looking for, what works for you, or what you like. Hair texture and length and color and skin tone and elasticity. And, it's very personal. And we want to make sure that all of our consumers and guests feel welcomed and like they belong at Ulta Beauty. And so, diversity and inclusion is part of our strategy. It's critical to enabling us to drive market share growth and revenue growth. And so we continue to lean into inclusion and belonging and diversity because it's an important part of this category and an important part of our strategy. I think we also have to, be thoughtful about, other parts at ESG that don't make sense for our business. I think we're very focused on energy and risk management and, in the beauty category and specifically, there's a lot of opportunity to reduce waste from a packaging standpoint. So again, we're leaning into those areas that make sense for our business. On the tariff side, it is, again, a very dynamic environment. And I think what we try to do is, stay calm and focused and understand that it's continuing to evolve and make sure that we're not getting ahead of our skis, so to speak. We're a house of brands. And so our direct import exposure is pretty limited, but we have 600 brands who manufacture and have supply chains all over the world. And so we need to work with them to understand how are they thinking about the impact of tariffs, what choices are they making, and ultimately, how do we make sure that we're limiting the impact on the guest? I think we really try to take a partnership approach with our brands. We actually call them brand partners and really try to take a win-win approach and work collaboratively with them in the service of our guests. And so we're going to continue to work closely with them as they navigate some of these challenges. But I think from an investor standpoint, what we try to do is just, stay focused on the long term, understand that it's dynamic and that our brands will make choices and evolve as the environment evolves and just continue to provide clarity when we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I do like how you're leaning on the word dynamic as well. It definitely is a dynamic market right now. And I feel like folks are kind of to your point, I think folks are kind of getting tired of the whiplash as well because there's almost like too much to pay attention to. But to your point, just really honing in on what is important to my company, and how are we impacted by some of these major changes that are being released through the news is really a good place to stay, right? And stay and sit and just bring it back to, okay, what does this mean for my corporation? And since you it sounds like you guys have a really in-depth, integrated, and strong strategy that it's really easy to just kind of lean back on that and be like, hey, that's my North Star. There's a lot going in markets right now, but we got to lean in on our strategy because we believe in it and it's going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I think dynamic is a much better word than volatile. I think both are true. But I think when the short term is so unpredictable, you have to stay focused on the long term and what you're trying to achieve and deliver for your guests, your associates, and your shareholders.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned earlier that you have 30 analysts covering you. That's a crazy amount. Well, let me say this. It's a healthy amount. So when you think about your conversations with the street and kind of managing those relationships, what's the biggest thing investors care about in Ulta's story right now? And how has that changed over time?
Well, I think the biggest area of focus, of course, is the short term impact on tariffs, the rising concerns about possible recession later this year, and how all of that impacts our operations and also our consumer. I think beauty is a category. I often say beauty is not immune to economic challenges, but it is pretty resilient. And again, that comes back to the emotional connection with the category, the accessible price points. When everything around you is crazy, the focus on self-care or the a great red lipstick or a great hair day, it can go a long way to building confidence and calm. And so I think it's beauty is a good category to be in the midst of uncertainty. I think for Ulta Beauty specifically, in addition to the broader questions, I think, how do we maintain our competitiveness? How are we driving share? What makes us different than other beauty retailers? How are we thinking about expanded distribution? All of those operational questions are pretty consistent, I'd say, over time. And so today, the questions are a little bit different, but the topics are very similar. Competitive positioning, growth plans and objectives, and market share expectations.
I gotcha. And then when dealing with investors, so we opened up this podcast and I was trying to give our listeners just a little bit more context into Ulta Beauty and then kind of dive into, the investment story. And I realized that not all investors may get that basic understanding. So it had me thinking about, what you think that investors sometimes miss or might misunderstand about Ulta Beauty.
I think what is one of our challenges from an investor relations standpoint is that many of the investors that we talk to don't engage with the category very much. And so we often talk about our target customer being a beauty enthusiast, someone who is passionate about beauty. For them, it's not about need, it's about want. I can't tell you how many mascaras I have, or serums I have, or lipsticks I have in my stash because it's not about need. It's about what's the newest launch from Elf or Chanel or Drunk Elephant that I want to try. And so helping investors understand the mindset of our guest can be challenging. I think other elements that we talked about earlier, the innovation in the category, the number of brands that exist and are coming to market every day. Because beauty is so personal, what we see often is an entrepreneur, will make something because they can't find a solution in the market. And so we have brands that we launch that have 5 products, 6 products, 10 products because they found a niche that no one else is paying attention to. And so that innovation is a really exciting part of the category. But again, it's unique to beauty, the number of brands that come to market every day. And so I think helping investors understand those elements and how then they play into assortment decisions, consumer behavior, frequency, basket build, all of those things, right? But understanding the, key dynamics from a consumer standpoint and a category standpoint is usually where I start.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you for explaining that. It's very helpful. So we're running up on time today. So I always like to close these podcasts with just one last piece of advice. So for the IRO pros listening, what's one piece of advice that you would give our listeners today?
So I have 3 actually. One is be a student of your business. I think I'm constantly learning about our business, about beauty, about our consumers. And I think that enables me to have credible, detailed conversations with investors and build that trust. I think second, and we all know this, but I think it's helpful to be reminded. The folks that we talk to often or less frequently don't know our business, right? They are following multiple companies. I think a stat that I've seen was the average buy side analyst or portfolio manager is covering more than 100 companies. That's a lot of detail to keep up with, so be patient. And then I think third, never burn bridges. As I said earlier, I've been in the IR seat for more than 25 years, and people move around. People, come and go. And I think maintaining those relationships and that trust and credibility is really important in an industry that continues to, evolve.
Thank you for that. I'm definitely jotted your advice down. But in terms of your last piece, never burn bridges, I just wanted to comment that, I'm not an IRO, but I do go to a lot of like the NEARI events and as well as a local chapter here, the Rocky Mountain NEARI events. And you're right, it's a tight community, right? And it's just even attending these events, I feel like I've created a really good network of folks and colleagues and people that I run into like all of the time at these events and within this space. So I like that piece of advice there.
One of the things that I love about investor relations is the camaraderie, right? And the willingness to help and share experiences and network. I think it is a unique element of this role.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kylie, for joining us today. That is all the time that we have. Thank you for listening. If you guys have any topics you'd like covered, you can reach out via carmen.lilly@spglobal.com. I'm always on the lookout for new topics and ideas and feedback into the podcast, so happy to take those. Until next time, happy listening. Thank you.